Hello guys, welcome to a new thing that I'm trying out here for the first time today on my YouTube channel. And I just wanted to record commentary tracks, because I know a lot about old movies and TV shows and stuff. And I decided that there's nowhere better to start than Classic Who, really, because I have a lot of knowledge about Classic Who. And specifically, I have a lot of knowledge about this serial in particular, which is Planet of the Daleks. One of my favorite guilty pleasure serials, personally. It's not the best, but I do think it is Pertwee's best Dalek story, and we'll get into that later on. Anyway, I'm on Amazon via the BritBox subscription. When you press play here, it just starts with the Doctor Who intro. So that's where we're going to be starting, guys. And we are going to start in 3, 2, 1. Alright, so starting off here, we just got the basic Pertwee intro. The first Pertwee intro, which is actually one of my favorite intros in the show of all time. In fact, Pertwee, John Pertwee, the third Doctor, is my favorite Doctor. I just think he has this charisma about him, which really isn't captured by any other actors that played the role. In part, I do like. I do think Peter Capaldi shares the same sort of air, and they do look very similar, actually. They're very similar Doctors as well, which is why Peter Capaldi is one of my favorite Doctors as well. He's my third favorite, and Colin Baker's my second favorite. Starting off right now, we'll see right away this story, the serial, is a direct sequel to The Frontier in Space, which is purportedly one of Pertwee's favorite stories. Ironically enough, Peter Capaldi also apparently adores Frontier in Space. And it's very easy to see why, because Frontier in Space, it's a classic, it's sort of a, how do I really explain this? It's got a lot of villains in it, it's got a lot of different monsters, and that's one of Pertwee's favorite things, is he always loved the episodes that had so many monsters in them, you know? Anyway, Frontier in Space features the Draconians, which are, they only appeared once in all of Doctor Who. They are Pertwee's favorite aliens. And they're very interesting people. They're obviously based off of, like, draconian laws and government and stuff like that. And they have a very nice, practical, makeup, and stuff applied to them. Anyway, in the last episode of Frontier in Space, it's sort of halfway through the story, it's revealed that the Master is the villain. And the Master is the villain for a good portion of Pertwee's stories. Specifically in Season 8, the Master is the villain every single time, which makes it a little awkward when you're like, oh, I wonder who that twist villain, who looks a little bit like Roger Delgado is. Oh, guess what? It's Roger Delgado. You know? But goddamn, I love Roger Delgado. He and Pertwee on screen, they have such chemistry with each other, and you can tell they were good friends in real life. Sadly, though, Frontier in Space was Roger Delgado's last story. It was episode 6 of Frontier in Space was the only time on screen we've ever seen the Master working with the Daleks. And at the end of that story, it's sort of like the Daleks come in as a secondary twist villain. And it's like, oh shit, we didn't even know the Daleks were here, you know, sort of thing. And there were hints to it early in the story about, like, the Ogrons talking about their masters and stuff. It's a good, I don't want to spoil Frontier in Space too much, actually, even though I pretty much have spoiled both the major reveals in it. Because it is really a good story. I love Frontier in Space, and Planet of the Daleks comes directly after it. It's a direct sequel to Frontier in Space, where you have the Doctor, as the Daleks flee in the final episode of that, the Doctor wants to track them down, and he ends up on this planet Spyridon. Here we have the brilliant Katie Manning, playing Jo Grant, who is the third Doctor's second companion. And I have mixed feelings on Jo Grant. Like, you'd think she'd be my favorite companion, since Pertwee's my favorite Doctor. But out of the 3 real companions that Pertwee had, she's actually my least favorite. And in stark contrast to that, Liz Shaw, who was Pertwee's first companion, lasted only 1 season. She is by far my favorite companion in the entire history of the show. Classic and New Who counted. You know, I love Liz Shaw so much. I think Caroline John is a really good actress, and she was unfortunately not given the chance to shine too well. I would have personally preferred having 4 seasons with Liz Shaw than the 3 that we got with Joe. Mainly it's because like every time I watch a story with Joe Grant, and especially in season 8, because you can tell like the writers for those first few stories, they were writing her with the intention of having Carolyn John back to film as Liz Shaw. And you can just tell like how much better those stories would have been if you had Carolyn John and John Pertwee bouncing off each other as they did in season 7. But, I mean, and that's no drag on Katie Manning, because she's a brilliant actress. She reappeared in the Sarah Jane Adventures, which, to my knowledge, is the only time she's appeared on television outside of the Third Doctor's run. I don't think she was in the 5 Doctors, but it's been a minute since I've seen the 5 Doctors, so I couldn't really tell you that. You'll notice here, especially if you're watching this on BritBox, that some of the parts of Planet of the Daleks are a little saturated. Like the colors are too bright in areas and other stuff like that, and that's because a lot of people might think that the sort of purge of the BBC archives ended with Patrick Troughton's era, but that's not entirely true, because there are a few missing Pertwee stories. But you wouldn't notice that they're missing because a process to bring those stories back, because they had the black and white copies still, so a process to recolor them was invented specifically for those stories. And Planet of the Daleks is one of the ones where there are a few parts missing. You've got these plants ejaculating all over the forest now. Joe Grant manages to get alien ejaculate on her a few times throughout her run. Most notably in Terror of the Autons, which is the first ever story. I think the best part about Planet of the Daleks, especially in this first episode here, because like you already know it's about the Daleks, but there is still a mystery to it as to where exactly we are, what goes on here, what the general threats are here. And it's just very interesting. It's very intriguing, especially this first episode as you're watching it, and you're wondering how things are going to progress. You're wondering like what comes next, what happens next. These first 2 episodes at least sort of keep you on your toes. I gotta say, the Dalek stories for Pertwee's era, there were only 3 of them, and all 3 of them were pretty bad. Up until, I've been doing the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon since the end of April, which is where you just start with William Hartnell, go all the way through to Jodie Whittaker, and just watch every single fucking special, every episode, every story, that's ever been made for Doctor Who. And it's been pretty fun. And I got the idea to do commentary tracks from that, actually, because as I was watching these episodes, I was like, I know a surprising amount of information about Doctor Who, especially classic Doctor Who. But anyway, specifically when I was rewatching Pertwee's era, which I just recently finished, I'm on Tom Baker's first season right now. I'm actually on Genesis of the Daleks, episode 1. Like, I haven't started it yet, but that's where I am. So that'll be fun. I don't know if I'll do a commentary track over that. I only really want to do tracks over serials that I'm specifically interested in, like Planet of the Daleks. And I think after this I'm going to do Invasion of the Dinosaurs, because that is another very nice serial that I think is often overlooked, very similar to Planet of the Daleks. Anyway, out of the 3 Pertwee Dalek stories, Day of the Daleks, Planet of the Daleks, and Death to the Daleks, I always remember Death to the Daleks being like the standout best one. And when I rewatched it, I was like, it's sorta not as good as I remembered it, like not nearly as good. And Planet of the Daleks was a lot better than I remembered it. I don't know if I'd consider it a good story, But it has my favorite Dalek design in it, first of all, which we'll see in episode 6. Um, so there's brownie points going to it. And secondly, it's just a very interesting story. Whereas Death to the Daleks, I feel like it was too short. Ironically, most classic Who stories, you'll be like, this is too long. Why are they just padding out the runtime here? But with Death to the Daleks, I felt it was way too short. They could have easily tacked on another 2 episodes. And it made the Daleks look even more of a joke than they do in the other Pertwee stories. And specifically, Planet of the Daleks, I was like, the Daleks sort of have a little threat here. You know, like, you're actually a little scared of their capabilities. Especially when it's revealed at the end of this episode or the next one, I can't remember. When it's revealed, like, what the Daleks are up to, it's like, oh, shit. You know, it's sort of a big beat in the story where it's like, well, fuck, this is what we're gonna have to go up against. That sadly isn't expanded in the rest of the story, and I think that's why most people dislike it, because that aspect, that thing that the Daleks are working on, is never brought up again in the rest of the story. Here we see Katie Manning poking around a very nicely constructed spaceship set. And you can tell, like, this was a set here, and the outside was probably filmed in a different location, because that was very clearly, like, some sort of prop, or, you know, I wouldn't expect this to have been inside of that. I also really like the Thal spacesuits in this story. Like, they just look, very simplistic, but very nice at the same time. One of Pertwee's, less recognizable outfits, I feel here. Pertwee and Baker, Tom Baker that is, were very unique in the classic Who days because they were very unique because they changed their outfits quite a lot, whereas every other Doctor sort of had a consistent outfit that they would wear throughout the entirety of their run. But Tom Baker and John Pertwee switched up their outfits a lot, and this green one here, it's a very nice one that I don't think it's used too often. Obviously, the most famous one is the red and black, like, sort of vampire-looking dandy scientist outfit that he's got, and wears for most of his run. Very nice gun props as well. Like, they're very, I don't know. I don't quite know how to describe it, but I do like the look of them and how they sort of attach to the belt like that. Like, that's just a very clean prop right there. And it's interesting to see. First of all, I do like that the Thals, like, all sort of have an Aryan look to them, which is weird, but it's like, even though the race is human, you can tell that since they cast all sort of Aryan-looking people to play the Thals, like, those are, like, the sort of racial differences that do exist. You know, Thals are less wide in their scope than humans are. And I'm pretty sure they all have brown eyes as well, so it's not technically Aryan. But it's a good contrast to the Daleks, who were based off of Nazis. To just have, like, both of those races represent very, very sort of big, things that were going on in that time. Like, obviously, the Thals represent the sort of, more peace-loving states or countries of World War II, like Switzerland, that, were very opposed to war, and the Daleks just represent this rampaging force that spreads across the universe, spreading their hatred and fear all over the place. And it's very powerful imagery. I want to do a video essay on how the Daleks, how they basically fell from grace, and how they were originally, like, very scary, especially at the time that these serials came out. As also in representing, I should say this now. Planet of the Daleks also sort of acts as a sequel, a loose sequel to the Daleks, which is the second ever serial produced of Doctor Who, the second ever story, and it featured the Daleks. They've been with the show since that early on. And the Thals in that were peace-loving, like they did not want to have anything to do with war. They didn't want to fight the Daleks, but you can tell the centuries that have passed since then, the Thals, they've developed spaceflight, obviously, they've developed weaponry. They've become a more militaristic-minded race ever since they had to adapt to the Daleks' evolution as well. So it's very interesting seeing like sort of how far from grace the Thals have fallen as well, because they used to just be peace-loving, and the Doctor mentions that here. He's like, you guys used to be chill. Which is very interesting compared to William Hartnell's Doctor, who was all about weaponizing the Thals. Like, he wanted the Thals to take action against the Daleks. So I suppose there's some differences in sort of how each Doctor perceived the Thals to be in their respective eras. I love how they moved, because you hear this, the Spyridans here, they're like invisible people that inhabit Spyridon. So I love how they just sort of manipulated the set to make it look like someone was moving through there. Because obviously they don't have an actor in there that's green screened. Like, sometimes they do, but most of the time it's just ways they move the set. Like, you can tell right there, that's a green screen. But most of the time it's just the way that they interact with the set, which is very interesting. See, like, that's obviously just someone opening a door there to represent the Spyridan walking out, and obviously they've got something to push into the mud. Sort of make it look like footprints there that they've probably green screened out, or probably that might be a special effect, I'd imagine. Maybe they had like two shots of it, one with footprints, one without, and they slowly overlaid it on. Oh, look, Pertwee's changed, it looks. He's in his sort of maroon outfit now. That's interesting. I don't think I've ever noticed that before. That he changed his outfit probably in between shooting those scenes. I wonder how consistent it remains throughout other serials. I wonder if that's a thing that happens a lot. This story represents like sort of the trend at the time, which was the decline of the Time Lords and their powers, because you can tell when they first appeared in the War Games, they were like all-powerful god things, and nowadays like the Doctor's just calling on them and being like, hey guys, give me a lift to Skaro or Spyridon or whatever, and they do it, and it's like, what? Would the Time Lords really care all that much about where they put the Doctor or where the Doctor's going? Like, they specifically exiled him to Earth for a reason. These are very, especially the commander here. I forget what his name is. I think it's Terran. I'm pretty sure it's Terran. He has just a very nice, sort of commanding presence. And I love how his character sort of develops over the serial, where he starts just staunch, like, in-command person who you think is going to be antagonistic to the Doctor. But then in the end, it turns out that, he's working with the Doctor, like he wants to do his plan, and then it's his subordinates which are trying to be rebellious, like Vager here. Here he is talking about you know, the original The Daleks serial, where he helped the Thals break into the Dalek city and sort of gain sort of independence from them or freedom from the Daleks. And usually I don't like it, especially, this is especially a big thing in New Who, when the Doctor is basically this godly figure in legend that's just known throughout the universe for being the savior of everything. And I hate that so much, because in Classic Who, the Doctor was almost always just a traveler. But I accept it in this episode specifically, because they mentioned that, oh, there's a legendary figure, in our myths that's known as the Doctor, who helped us all those years ago in the Dalek War. They mentioned that, and I'm alright with the Doctor being a legend to the Thals, because he sort of did help them lead a revolution, and he sort of helped them evolve into what they are nowadays. So I'm fine with isolated events like that. If it makes sense for the Doctor to be a legend to a certain group of people, then it's alright, but it doesn't make sense for him to be like Space Jesus. I mean, I guess you could argue that he's stumbled into enough situations to warrant a reputation. That's a very lame explanation, personally. Like, oh, here's that wacky guy that just one day came along and helped us. Oh, you guys had that dude too? It's sort of... It's very weird. And then then there's this, like, why would no one recognize the Doctor after that? Like, after they saved the universe multiple times, why can they just stumble into set again and be like, hey, I'm the Doctor, and no one questions it? Like, okay. That's just a person known as the Doctor. That's no one we know. Like, people would probably be like, oh no, we've heard about you in legends or whatever, so it just doesn't make sense. And like, the Space Jesus imagery is so, especially in New Who, it's just so apparent. And it's so abrasive. I do love that. That's one of my favorite suits of his. I like the blue one, and that maroon burgundy one right there is really good as well. Then obviously the red and black one, which he's famous for, is my favorite. I don't know if I've explained they probably have explained the fungus right now, which is a very interesting sort of just makeup that they had. Like, I wonder, because when classic Doctor Who, this is especially apparent, usually they just used whatever the BBC had. They didn't get a lot of props that were made specifically for them, unless it was like futuristic episodes. So it's like, oh, if people are filming like a documentary over here or something about the Middle Ages, we can borrow our Viking costumes from them and borrow other props from them and stuff like that. But I think that a fungus prosthetic that you can see like growing on Joe later on, and like it's on her hand right now, I think that was made specifically for this episode, and it's a nice bit of makeup right there. It just looks disgusting, you can almost feel it on your hand when you look at that. It's all like crusty and shit. Here we're about to get the big cliffhanger for episode 1, and they use their spray paint on the Dalek. Yes, it's very... God, it's such a good concept. And it's like this cliffhanger specifically, it's like, oh shit. What even happens now? And here we're on the cliffhanger, so I'll just talk through these next 50 seconds. But it's like, holy shit, we've got invisible Daleks that we've got to worry about. This is a thing that we have to worry about. And then it does not come up again after this specific instance. And it's such a missed opportunity, because it would have been interesting, like, having the Thals or Pertwee like running through the forest, and they've got to deal with those fungus plants that are spraying shit all over the place. And then they're just getting shot at from like invisible Daleks and shit's blowing up around them. That could have made for some interesting scenes, and it could have been like, fuck, what do we even do? But anyway, thank you guys for tuning into the first episode of this commentary track. I hope you enjoyed it. I am gonna do all of them, all of the episodes of Planet of the Daleks at least. And if you guys like it, then I will do more in the future.